The first thing I saw when I pulled into my driveway was somebody's pickup in my spot, headlights still warm, and a set of curtains I didn't recognize through my own front window. My stomach went cold before my legs even finished carrying me up the steps. I shoved the key in the door and it opened like a lie. I belonged to the house, but the house didn't belong to me anymore. I'm Tommy Hayes. I'd lived in that place long enough to know which floorboard creaked when the mailman dropped off a package, long enough to have carved my initials into the underside of the back porch rail, and long enough to think home was more than an address. I'd also been gone 3 months' work overseas, a contract that kept me away, and when I came back, I found strangers on my couch, a toddler's toy I didn't own on my rug, and a woman with a smile so thin it could cut glass standing in my kitchen. "You must be mistaken," she said, like that would fix everything. "This is our house now." Evelyn Grant, that's what the envelope on the counter called her, wore the kind of calm that hides years of practice. Pearl earrings, neat bun, a clipboard that felt like armor. She introduced herself like it was etiquette and not theft. Behind her, a couple with sleepy eyes and a baby carrier looked at me as if I were a dream they'd been told was real. I asked for paperwork. She handed me a stack, each page smoothed as if someone had been waiting for me to arrive and had already rehearsed which lines to read. Bylaw this, abandonment that, notice mailed this date, paperwork that looked clean but smelled of someone else's fingerprints. I read words that said my name, then said I'd lost more than my front door. They said the board had followed procedure. They didn't say how paperwork can be twisted into a rope. That's where the story ends for a lot of people. Shock, a phone call, then a confused walk away. But something in me didn't let it end. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was shame, more likely both. I rented a cheap motel room for the first week, sleeping in a chair, waking up with my hands cramped from gripping my phone, trying to make sense of a timeline someone else had written for me. I started with the obvious: neighbors. Mrs. Alvarez on Maple remembered me watering her roses before I left. "You were always kind, Tommy," she said, and that kindness bought me a story about a meeting, an evening where the HOA board voted on abandonment while I was 3,000 miles away. Mr. Conway, 2 houses down, gave me a printout, minutes of a meeting with handwriting on the margins, a name scratched out and replaced. Names matter. Dates matter. Signatures can be forged, but motives are easier to find. Evelyn had a motive that smelled of power. The common green space behind my house, little, useless except to the board, was suddenly useful once you could turn it into a driveway, or a development plan, or a buffer to justify fees and fines. There were whispers about a nearby builder, and a couple of votes that had gone suspiciously in one direction. Greed isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's a spreadsheet, a whispered phone call, a consultant who knows how to make legality look like destiny. I found an ally when I least expected one: Marcus Reed, a retired title examiner who walked 2 blocks with a cane and an honest face. Marcus had a habit of smelling trouble the way some people can smell rain. He sat at a diner table with a heap of old deeds spread like playing cards and tapped one corner with his finger. "They moved fast," he said, "and they moved clean. Whoever did this owns a printer and a conscience on vacation." He didn't say much, but he showed me where to look: escrow accounts, appraisal dates that leapt ahead of where they should be, and an appraisal company that, coincidentally, had been paid by the same shell company that had written checks to an administrative consultant for the association. We built the timeline like a puzzle we both hated to solve. Stamped envelopes, GPS data for utility shutoffs, emails that had been conveniently deleted but left traces in server logs, little ghosts that told the truth. I learned to be boring about it. More paperwork, more calls, more requests for records. The more tedious I became, the more cracks showed in the story Evelyn had prepared. She pushed back. She sent emails with thinly veiled warnings. She came to my motel once at night and leaned against my doorframe, eyes sharp as a scalpel. "Tommy, you should let this go," she said, like a neighbor, like a judge. She was good at turning sympathy into suspicion, and suspicion is a tool rich people like to sharpen. There was a low point, filing motion after motion, sitting in a courtroom where the judge read a stack of paper and said, "We'll need time." Time is a funny thing. It can heal, but it can also let a lot of bad intentions calcify into reality. I watched the new family move pictures into frames and paint over markings on the wall I had left. I felt every inch of my life being edited out. But then something changed. Marcus found a ledger-linear accounting mistake, so big it looked like an accident, except accidents don't usually include money wired to an address that didn't exist. A whistleblower, a young board member named Rachel who'd been on the margins, hands shaking as she handed me a USB drive turned to trickle weed, had into a flood. Her voice on the stand later still trembled when she told the room she'd been pressured to sign minutes she didn't agree with. Pressure is an ugly, quiet violence. She made it visible. We filed an injunction. The judge, finally, looked at the evidence and issued a temporary freeze on the title. For the first time in weeks, I slept without my phone in my hand. For the first time, the house felt like something else than loss. The DA, a sent an investigator serious, soft-spoken, who smelled of old books and had a notebook the size of a small novel. He asked questions that made Evelyn tighten. Power makes people sloppy when it's threatened. Evelyn's tactics changed from polite to poisonous. Anonymous blog posts appeared, painting me as a bitter ex-owner who'd been trying to scam a poor family out of a home. There were phone calls to employers, whispers on the street, neighbors torn between fear and the truth. She organized a special meeting, a public hearing at the community center, confident she could sway the crowd with charm and a stack of forged minutes. That was her mistake. She underestimated how many small, honest people prefer truth when they see it. The clubhouse the night of the hearing was packed, news vans, neighbors with folding chairs, that electric hum that comes when everyone in a room is waiting to see a wrong righted. I remember standing there and wanting to speak quietly, not yell. Marcus passed me a stack of papers. Rachel gave me a small nod, and the DA's investigator sat near the front in a cheap suit that made him look less important than the work he did. We laid out Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C, each one a small, stubborn fact that refused to be explained away. The appraisal had been dated before the meeting that authorized it. Someone had backdated a document to make it look lawful. The consultant's checks went to a P.O. box that, when chased, led back to a shell at an address that belonged to a mail facility. Worst of all, a notarized statement claiming my abandonment bore a signature my neighbor said belonged to a woman who had been in another state that day. Evelyn tried to speak. She tried the smile, the clipped sentences, the practiced outrage. "We did what we thought was best," she said, voice smooth as lacquer. But when Rachel took the stand and read aloud an email Evelyn had written where Evelyn thanked a contractor for taking care of the Hayes property, the room shifted. There was a sound like a collective intake of breath. Shame is loud when it drops into a quiet room. When the DA read probable cause, the script changed from community drama to something more official. Evelyn was not arrested in handcuffs in front of a crowd like a TV show. It happened the way most justice does, awkward, human, procedural officers taking her aside, asking questions, the flash of a camera catching a face that had been so careful it finally looked disheveled. She left with that same thin smile, but smaller now, like a costume coming loose. The aftermath was messy and necessary. The board dissolved. Volunteers came forward to help rebuild policy and transparency in tiny, sensible ways. The new family, terrified and apologetic, decided to leave. They'd been victims in a scheme they didn't understand. The title was cleared, restitution was discussed in legalese that felt inadequate compared to the months I'd spent sleeping on a motel chair, but the house came back to me in a way that mattered more than paperwork. Neighbors brought over casseroles. Mr. Conway fixed the back porch rail I'd carved my initials into, and Marcus stopped by to complain about the coffee at my place being inferior to the diner's. Small, ordinary things stitched a life back together. Still, I don't want this to read like a neat ending. Evelyn's case was prosecuted, but the bigger question, why a system designed for community can be bent into a tool for private gain, didn't vanish with one arrest. The HOA model is a beautiful thing gone wrong when secrecy and money slip in. Some of my neighbors still say she had the neighborhood's best interest at heart. Others call it corruption in minutes and ink. That argument kept the comments section alive on the local news for weeks, and if I learned anything, it's that people will fight to defend a version of the truth that suits their memories. So here I am, back on my porch at dusk, watching the world settle the way it always does, dogs chasing shadows, kids riding bikes, an old man with a cane who now waves every time I pass. The house creaks like it always did, and my initials are still under the rail, a small, stubborn fact. I still get angry some nights. I still think about how close I came to losing not just a piece of property, but the history that was tied up in it. But I also think about the friends I found, Marcus, Rachel, the neighbors who chose honesty over convenience. They're the reason the story didn't end in a quiet theft. If you've ever felt a place you love be taken from you, or watched power hide behind polite words, tell me below. Tell me where the line is between community and control, and if you think this ended the right way. Share if you've seen something strange with your HOA, your neighborhood, anything that made you raise an eyebrow, and keep it raised. And if you like this, hit like, subscribe, and drop your opinion. I read every comment, even the ones that make me angry, because that's how we figure out what justice looks like together.